if you scroll back, you'll see videos where I am genuinely trying to figure out CPTSD, and it was driving me nuts. I felt like I would watch videos and I wouldn't really grasp what they were talking about. I didn't understand. To me, it just sounded like borderline personality disorder, and I didn't understand why in the world did somebody come up with something different when it's already invented. And I don't know if people just weren't starting at the beginning of what CPTSD is, or if they didn't really understand either. It's just this thing that came out of the blue. I think what helps to understand, and I've continued this journey quietly trying to figure out CPTSD, and I think I finally get it. And I'm sure, like with anything else, you continue to grow, you continue to process, you continue to bump into aha moments. But I just want to explain it to you the way I see it. And if you disagree or can give us any more insight, meaning us, the viewers, any more insight or corrections, or say, no, that's not quite it, this is it, then please let me know. I think it really helps to have a person as a point of reference to understand what CPTSD actually can look like. And I think there are variations to it. So I may be on one train of thought when there are other variations. So I know plenty of borderlines, and I've met plenty of borderlines. Perhaps some of those borderlines actually had CPTSD, but what glaringly stands out for me, if I were to say this is a major difference between BPD and CPTSD, it would be that abandonment factor. And I'm not saying that somebody with CPTSD doesn't have that abandonment fear, like afraid of people leaving me, like you walk out of the room and I feel terrified that I will never see you again type fear. I think somebody with CPTSD can have some abandonment fears or not, but it doesn't drive them the same way it does somebody with BPD. Like, I personally have some abandonment fears when it comes to romantic relationships that used to be utterly terrifying to me, and it got in the way of me really bonding and connecting. But I've been able to really work through some of that. And I think that can come from like being an Enneagram 4, or if your attachment style, like my attachment style is fearful avoidant. So I made a bunch of videos on that because I'm figuring it out as I go and taking you along with me. At the core of that can be fear of someone leaving you, but it's still not the same as BPD, because for me, once I get out of a romantic relationship, that intense fear of abandonment goes away. Didn't realize that until now. Yeah, it doesn't follow me. I don't feel it with family, friends, colleagues. I don't feel it. But when I get involved romantically, it intensifies to the point where it's difficult for me to push through the relationship. So with CPTSD, they don't have that driving force, from what I can see, of abandonment. If you walk out of the room, I'm terrified that I'll never see you again. And that thing following them all day long, every day, nonstop, terrifying them. No, it's not that. But what I do see at the core of some people with CPTSD is this drive to be incredibly busy. You might say that that's really shallow and that doesn't matter, but I like to point out things that you won't find in the DSM-5. And I don't think this is in the DSM-5 anyway. That's something I need to double check. But even when I'm studying narcissistic personality disorder or people with ADHD, there are things that I notice about ADHD that may not be listed in the DSM-5. Like, they could have huge temper tantrums And I don't think that that's listed as a criteria, but many of them do. And so people will try to say, oh, that ADHD kid is just bad. And it's not that. They cannot control their impulses. But anyway, CPTSD, there is this core with, I will say some of them, that they need to stay incredibly busy. They have found that as it's not really a defense mechanism, a coping strategy. They have found that as a coping strategy. They can become so busy that they start to wear themselves out. They are fatigued, they are worn out. It's almost like an addiction that they can't stop, because if they get off the roller coaster and it's still moving, the fear is that it could drive them into a space of psychosis, which they are trying to avoid. So if I stay busy, if I'm helping everybody, if I have a million projects, if I have a project and I figure out how can I make this more complicated so that I stretch it and it lasts longer and it gives me more to do, then I win. And for other people, it's like, no, I don't want to go the long way around. I want to go the short way so we can make this quicker. Like, I don't want my projects to be like that. Like, what is the quickest, simplest, most efficient way? But CPTSD, they need to be busy. So what looks similar is this bottomless pit. I don't know if you ever watched Sesame Street with Oscar the Grouch and his trash can, and elephants live down in there. And you're like, how did you fit all that down in a trash can? But for me, it symbolizes bottomless pit. Like, I need to get as many things down there that are as impossible as possible in order for me to feel filled up. BPD can take notes from this, and many BPDs also grab on to this notion of being beyond busy, a busyness that the average person absolutely cannot handle, or it will make them go absolutely nuts. They will feel like, I need to rest. I need to sit down somewhere. But not so with CPTSD and BPD. So this is where it can become similar. It's like there's that chronic boredom that can be similar. And I think CPTSD might be more tapped in, might be more aware, might be able to grasp and understand what's happening better than a BPD, because BPD is so deep into the running from abandonment that it might be more difficult and challenging for them to think about, consider, or even handle. But CPTSD doesn't want to get into that thought process where their thoughts are scaring them. Their thoughts are not in their control, and they're just going everywhere. They're making them think about things they don't want to think about. Is super upsetting and scary. Super scary. I think borderlines are on a hamster wheel that is so driven by the fear of abandonment that, like I said, they may not be as in touch with that. I find that people with narcissistic personality disorder can also be the same way. I wrote a book called The Workplace Narcissist, where for me, and not to confuse everybody, but there's a combination of OCD personality disorder combined with that narcissistic personality disorder that raises them to a higher height, but they can also be like laced with thoughts, and they might also have some just plain OCD component that's driving them a little bit crazy. So I feel like, and now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if some people, I'm sure some people with CPTSD have developed some OCD in there, but I'm wondering if it's just CPTSD alone that handles that function of OCD, where you can't, the incessant thinking that is, OCDs, they have thinking that will tell them to do bad things, or they're thinking very sexual, or they're just, it gets out of control, right? And obsessive. But I think CPTSD can have those thoughts, the racing thoughts, and they control it by being overly busy. But the problem is they can wear themselves down with that because they never get to rest, and eventually that gets old. But when they try to quiet down, that doesn't work either. So then they get back on I gotta stay busy. I gotta clean my house 30 times because I don't have anything to do. I think it helps CPTSD to be in therapy. I think everybody needs therapy, but I think it helps if they can have consistent therapy, like once a week, or at least, once every couple of weeks. I think that can help them to maintain, to process. I think they have to gradually get out of being on that hamster wheel. And that might be 1 minute a day where I sit and try to tolerate relaxing my thoughts. And just like with any addiction, I think cold turkey might be difficult for them. My concern is them getting enough rest and not overworking their mind with this strategy. So they would probably need to spend a minute every other day where I'm doing nothing. And I'm getting used to this feeling of doing nothing. But I think they would have to do it very carefully. At the core was a traumatic event. Something that, not just an event, because PTSD is a traumatic event. A war veteran experienced a traumatic event in war. This person might have been molested over a period of time. And so now you're trying to cope with something very traumatic. So it changes your brain chemistry, doesn't it? And that's how CPTSD develops. They may not want this person who has had that type of experience may not like hugs, like don't touch me. I don't want intimacy. Get away from me. So that would be something that they would have to work on in a relationship, because the core of marriage is intimacy. So they would have to work on that. So there are going to be other triggers. They can also disassociate, but so can people with BPD. They can both dissociate. Somebody with CPTSD can blank out for 30 minutes and not know where they were or what they were doing. And that could be really scary, but it's like their mind's way of giving them a break or helping them to cope or escape from something traumatic. But it happens at times when it's not useful. If that could happen when they were being molested, well, the brain has just protected itself. But when it starts to automatically put that defense mechanism in place at inopportune times, that's a problem. So, of course, they can dissociate, but so can BPDs. So with BPDs, I feel like the core for them is bonding. Did they bond with their caregiver? A lot of imprinting happens, just like with birds. If they don't bond with their mother, they won't learn their song if the mother leaves them too early. And the same thing with humans. If they don't bond with another human, they could become borderlines. And especially if it's in their genetic lineage, which it probably is. And so then that person hasn't learned how to bond. So then you're creating a whole heritage of issues. I think with somebody with CPTSD, they could very much have bonded with their caregivers, with their siblings. That's not the problem, but they may feel like they weren't protected enough in certain situations that occurred for them over time. They may not have felt protected enough, or maybe their family was poverty stricken and that created a lot of trauma that couldn't be helped or prevented. So they may not have felt protected enough. And what's interesting is somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, many of them have been sort of left to their own devices to be adults way too early. So I would think with a CPTSD person, there could be a little bit of similar vibes, but it might not be that. It could be they had a caregiver, but the caregiver had some mental breakdowns and couldn't. The core of CPTSD is prolonged trauma. The core of BPD, if you have to pick something, is that inconsistent parenting was occurring. More than likely. Not always. But nobody can remember that far back. Most people can't. To being 1, 2, or, I can remember being 3. But even though your parents may seem like a great parent, you don't know what was happening in that first year where you can't remember. Like, were they going through their own, a breakup with your father and they couldn't handle it emotionally, and so they weren't as consistent with caring for you, or they were giving you to people to take care of because they needed a break and you didn't know your little brain was not forming around safety. So yeah, I know I'm throwing in a lot of things, but I'm kind of letting you see a little bit how my mind works. And I'm an ENFJ on Myers-Briggs, Enneagram 4. So yeah, I like to use my intuition, and I don't always share that. But I'm sharing with you my intuitive process on how I'm interpreting CPTSD to be, in hopes of helping people with it. I think it's an easier cure. It might be more difficult because they may be more aware in some senses than somebody with BPD. So that could be a plus and a negative, because they may not be able to escape it in the same way. Although I think BPD can be deeply painful in a whole different way for a long, I think CPTSD can maybe escape it more and enjoy some aspects of life more. Not saying that it can't be really difficult. CPTSDs could also have a parent who's an alcoholic, or they could have had a tumultuous family dynamic happening as well, but there may have been more stability than, they just couldn't get it together, or they just had a lot of chaos or poverty or just different things that they couldn't figure out in the midst of this thing happening to them. So I think they need intensive therapy to help them to feel better, because that's the main thing, is you want people to be happy and feel good and be able to cope and not have this as the center of their existence, because it could be really tough. So at the core is a ton of anxiety, and just hugs to any CPTSD people. And if you have any questions, put it in the comments and I can try to help figure it out. So yeah, just my 2 cents. Let me know if I'm right and let me know if I'm wrong. So hey, beautiful people, thanks for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments and what topics you want me to explore next. Your feedback means so much to me. Let's keep this adventure going. Don't break up with me. Be sure to subscribe and like the video. Check out my books on Amazon for insights on enhancing your love life, navigating narcissistic personalities, and exploring the 16 Myers-Briggs personality types. Links are in the description. You're amazing, and I can't wait to see you on the next video.